The most important thing, the first step in dealing with narcissistic in-laws, is to get your spouse on your side. This is not always easy, but is paramount to you dealing with your in-laws. As mentioned in my first video, if your in-laws are narcissistic, there's a large chance your spouse will have issues as well. He or she may be narcissistic as well, or have narcissistic traits and see nothing wrong with their family's behavior. Or they may be codependent and willfully ignore the abuse as they are desperately trying to get the approval of their parents. They may also realize the abuse but not be willing to go against the parents due to them not wanting to be disinherited or lose contact with other family members. Refrain from bringing up your in-laws and their behaviors when you are arguing with your spouse. They will just see anything you say as a personal attack, even if they know the behaviors are wrong. Thus, I suggest you approach the subject tactfully with your spouse, walking up to them and setting an ultimatum that they have to choose between you and their family from the get-go may not go the way you hope it will. You may want to focus first on a specific action your in-laws do and bring that up with your spouse. Maybe ask their advice on dealing with the issue. After all, it is their parents and they may know how their parents tick. Slowly you can bring up more and more issues you have with your in-laws with your spouse as they side more and more with you. The sad thing is that if your spouse refuses to side with you, defends their family, invalidates your concerns, gaslights you, or does the same behaviors as their parents, your relationship is heading for unstable waters and may not survive. Or you are in for a lot of abuse from your in-laws and your spouse. You may want to think carefully if you want a life of abuse from all sides where your spouse does not support you. Talk to your in-laws. Not all narcissistic people are narcissists. Some are just jerks, and some don't even know what they do is hurtful or offensive to you. Many people who grow up in a toxic environment took on toxic habits that they assume as normal. They have not been taught to be self-aware of how their actions affect others and may not have been taught to care about other people's feelings. It is possible that when you bring their behaviors to light, it may be the first time in their life that they honestly consider how their actions affect others. Just as with talking with your partner, you will need to do it in a non-confrontational way or making them feel as if you are judging them. Try not to give them a laundry list of things you do not like about them, but start with one thing and maybe ask them if they realize that it is hurting you or that you find it offensive. Your aim here is to actually see if they will start to analyze their behavior and if they care if they hurt you, and not to change their behaviors. They need to change their own behaviors. You may want to see a therapist who is skilled in dealing with narcissistic abuse to help you approach both your spouse and your in-laws. At first, you're not looking for immediate change, but looking for the willingness to change and work with you. If your in-laws are not willing to reflect on their behaviors and make an effort to change, you will need to accept they are not going to stop their behaviors unless they face action from you or your spouse. Set boundaries. Decide what behaviors you are okay with and what not. Then decide on what action you will take if a boundary is stepped over. Boundaries on their own do nothing. They are like road signs. It is the consequences for breaking a boundary or ignoring a road rule that gets people to respect boundaries and road signs. It will help tremendously if your spouse is on your side when setting boundaries with your in-laws. After deciding on your boundaries, communicate them to your in-laws in as non-threatening way as you can. Often narcissistic people will only respect your boundaries if they stand to lose something. For most in-laws, it is saying their child or grandchildren. It may feel bad, but using your children as weapons or your spouse as a bargaining chip is very effective. You may say to your in-laws that if they do not stop their behaviors, you will not come to visit and they cannot see their grandchildren. Or you and your spouse will not come to visit, so they cannot see their child. Of course, if you do not have the support of your spouse, enforcing boundaries may become impossible for you. You may consider having your parents there as well when you present your boundaries to your in-laws. This may help your in-laws to not see it as a personal attack and more as a family building rules for both sides. If your in-laws do blow up, at least you will have the support of your family. Be consistent. When you enforce consequences for in-laws breaking boundaries, you need to be consistent. You almost have to treat them like children, as they will try and push your boundaries and see what they can get away with. If you let things slide once, they will know they can break your boundaries if they just push hard enough. Be prepared for them throwing tantrums and trying to punish you for setting boundaries for them. Expect them to tell a different story to everyone and for them to claim to be the victim of your cruelty because they cannot accept accountability or responsibility for their own actions. No matter what they do, the only way they will respect your boundaries and you is if you stick to your boundaries. Say they keep calling you a degrading name and you said you will leave if they do it again. They may say it again jokingly and then apologize quickly. If you do try to leave, they will try to guilt trip you or even accuse you of overreacting. It is all just a show, and all they are after is getting away with their actions so they can prove your boundaries mean nothing. They are like 2-year-olds who just want the satisfaction of getting away with something. If you give in, they will remind you next time that last time you let it slide. So stick to your rules and enforce them strictly. Flatter them. If your spouse is not on your side, your only option may be to try and win your in-laws' favor. Try to talk as little about your life and accomplishments as possible and turn the conversation onto your in-laws. Act impressed and interested in their life. If they are a covert narcissist, then you may need to sit and listen to them complain for hours on end. Refrain from trying to solve their problems. Just agree with them that they must be suffering the most in the world and let them have their attention. When you get home, take a long bath and relax, as you will be exhausted by the narcissist. Call them out. If you have an in-law who always knows better than you or can do things better than you, then call them out on it. Make their narcissism a problem for them. Maybe they claim they can bake a better cake than you or can make better coffee than you. Well, next time there's a family meeting, say, "Oh, John can make the cake as he claims he can make the best cake in the world." Or, "How about making us some of those famous coffee you have been bragging about you can make, John?" I don't suggest you try and expose or embarrass them, such as if they claim to know everything about cars or scuba diving and you shoot off a list of questions to prove they are talking nonsense. Maybe say, "It's amazing that you know so much about diving. I'm going next weekend. I will reserve a spot for you." Or, "It is wonderful that you know everything about cars. Mine has a problem. Can you come and have a look or show me how to fix it myself?" Over time, the narcissist will learn that to brag or put you down will result in them being called out, and it may help them to leave you alone. If you try to share some accomplishments and they cut you off or dismiss your accomplishments, you can try responding with, "I see you don't seem interested in me," or "My accomplishments may not be impressive to you, but I'm proud of them." By directly exposing their lack of interest, they may take more interest in you or just stop invalidating you. Become less accessible. Start becoming less available without totally blocking your in-laws. Maybe you cannot come over every weekend anymore due to work, or they cannot come and visit as much. Find excuses to lessen the contact you have with them. In some cases, you may even consider moving further away from them to make it more difficult for them to visit. Or you may say that you will be visiting friends or your family for Christmas or want to have a holiday on your own. I've seen it work where one side of the family told the parents that after the parents' bad behavior at Easter, they'll be having Christmas on their own. They'll give the parents a second chance next Easter, and that's it. The parents from then bit their lips, but behaved as they wanted to spend time with their grandchildren. Look to other in-laws. If your spouse have siblings, you may look to how they handle your in-laws. Maybe they have found your in-laws' weak spot and know how to deal with him. However, be mindful that the other siblings and their spouses may be the favorite of your in-laws. Thus, they may get away with anything they do and get special treatment. If you are sure you can trust the spouse of your spouse's siblings, you may ask him for help in dealing with your in-laws. This is very risky and can backfire big time. However, your spouse's siblings may help to get your spouse on your side, and if you present a united front, your in-laws may be forced to respect you so they can see the other grandchildren or children. I've seen it work where the favorite child of the narcissist stepped up for the spouse of the sibling of the favorite child. You can also try to win over friends of your in-laws who they respect. Your in-laws may not treat you well because they respect you, but because they want the respect of others. But at least you get them to treat you decently. Disengage and disconnect. If your in-laws' behavior is toxic and they are interfering with your relationship with your spouse or abusing you or your children, then you need to disconnect from them. This may be the part where you get the most resistance from your spouse, and you will need to set boundaries with your spouse or give them an ultimatum to get them on your side. You may try avoiding your in-laws while your spouse still visits them, but this sets you up for your in-laws turning your spouse against you. If your in-laws are toxic and your spouse refuses to side with you or take any action to protect you and your children, then you will have to decide what is best for you and your children. It may be time for you to face the possibility of leaving your spouse. It is sad and unfair, but when it comes to dealing with your in-laws, the future of your relationship lies with your spouse. Without their support, you cannot effectively deal with your toxic in-laws. If your spouse doesn't choose you, accept it will never get better. Their beliefs and mindset were planted when young, and not choosing your side shows that you are and will always be second. Don't blame yourself. If you had to disengage or lessen contact, you may feel as if you failed in building a relationship with your in-laws. Accept that you cannot make another person like you. You cannot force another person to care about you or to change. They need to want to change by themselves and do the hard work themselves. If a person is a narcissist, then it is part of their personality that is driven by beliefs they hold deep inside them. Even with professional help, it often takes 5 to 10 years for a person to make meaningful changes if they work hard at it. To change your behaviors, you need to change your beliefs. And if a person does not believe there's anything wrong with their beliefs or actions, then nothing is going to change. Often the harder you push someone to change, the more they will resist to change.